So I want to start my talk out by quoting Ernest Holmes again. There's a lot of Ernest Holmes in this talk, so little Ernest Holmes this week. He said, we see ourselves rightly only when we see the self that is in all. No one can have a real or lasting joy and happiness stored up for oneself alone. Everything is meant to be shared. That's nice, that's sweet. I like that. When I read that quote, it reminded me that last year, about this time, actually it would have been a few weeks ago, exactly last year, PJ and I went on a cruise about a year ago. And it was my personal first cruise, first time I'd been on a ship that large with all those people. There was a couple thousand people there. And we had a lovely room with a balcony, la la la. It was wonderful, but like I said, we were on our first cruise, and here we were out at sea for 5 days. And we went to the Mexican coast. So, as I was thinking about this cruise, of course I was thinking about, well, what themes, what did I learn from this cruise? Yes, it was a lot of fun, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the fun we had. But what was going on? Because this was a cruise with, we had a group of probably close to 50 people that were like-minded. They were in New Thought and came purposefully together on this cruise. And we had a couple of workshops, and then we had a Q&A, which I was a part of. So, you know, my mind now and again was on, you know, what's going on here other than the fun. So, one of them, that's God. Take that. One of the themes was movement towards something, because you know you're on a ship, so you're moving. Now we personally didn't really have a problem, although we had the wrist thing and we had whatever pills just in case, but we didn't personally have a problem with the movement of the ship. But the idea is we are moving, and we are moving towards something. In this case, at least in the first 3 days, we were moving towards Mexico. And I thought, wow, well, that's perfect, because you know, we're talking about falling forward, which is a movement. We're talking about falling forward in life. We're talking about the act of falling forward, which is what we do when we walk. We are actually falling forward. And because of our equilibrium in our ears and et cetera, and learning how to walk, obviously, you know, we don't trip and fall usually, unless, you know, there's something in the way, or sometimes I'm thinking and I get a little, I don't pick up my feet and I trip over myself. But basically, falling forward is a movement towards something, always. We're going towards something. We're going towards the sink because it's our turn to do the dishes. We're going towards the stove because we're making dinner. We're going towards the car because we're going to go see the dude. Okay. The second theme that came up to me was abundance of opportunities and being provided for. Now, if you've ever been on a cruise, anybody been on a cruise? Yeah, you've been on a cruise? Yes, yeah, of course. You would know that it's all you can eat, all day, and all night. It's all you can gamble. There's a little casino there, so if you like to gamble, you can do that all day and all night. You can swim. That particular ship had two pools. You can buy things, not necessarily all night, but some of the stores are open 24 hours a day, so there's always something you can go buy if you want. On our cruise, they actually had this whole art gallery where you could spend a couple $1,000s and buy some artwork if you like. You could dance. You could dance all night. There's clubs that are open all night, and be entertained. Although personally I didn't like the shows, but that's another talk. You can be entertained. Entertainment is there all the time. All you have to do is be present and willing to get yourself to wherever it's at. You just have to show up. Now the ship is pretty large, but So you get all your walking in, but everything's available there for you. Pretty much anything you would require is there. There's even a doctor if you require one there. It's all available, but it's not just given. You have to leave your stateroom. There's a map. There's a timetable for certain things. Certain shows are at certain times. Certain shops are open at certain times. But you have to get there. You have to, like in this philosophy, not just think about it, not just read about it. You got to walk the talk. You got to get yourself out of that stateroom, no matter how comfy and lovely the balcony is, etc., and how beautiful the ocean is, which it very much is. You got to get out there and you got to walk the talk. Ernest Holmes wrote in a book called Thoughts Are Things, "It is impossible for you to receive that which your mind refuses to accept. If you desire to receive more, you need to consciously develop the ability to mentally encompass it. You make your life mean little and limit its possibilities when you refuse to accept the whole gift of God." And the whole gift of God is not always the good things, because the universe gives you the gifts that you believe, maybe not intentionally, but that you believe you deserve or that you require. And sometimes that's a cold, and that's annoying. And sometimes it's the lottery. Probably not so annoying, except for the people that call you once they find out you won. The third theme that came up for me was life is an adventure. Life is a journey and an adventure. When we got to what was the island what was the town we got to in Mexico? I don't remember.
Sabisco?
Anyway, so we reached the one place that we actually stopped and spent a day and a half on. We decided to go ziplining. Now, I've gone ziplining, don't remember where, and it wasn't like, it was fun and all, but it wasn't like crazy, but this ziplining got a little crazy. It was, there was like 7 of them, and the last one was like 1,200 feet down. Because some of them we zip-lined and we were actually going up. We would zip line and then we'd have to walk a little bit to get there. But when you zip line, you got to strap in and you got to take a leap. You strap in, but there is a moment when you're there and you're looking at whatever that is. The first ones are relatively short, probably like 50 feet, and it doesn't look too far away. Okay, I guess I can, all right. And you jump and you take a leap and you realize it's kind of fun. But then, of course, they get longer and longer. And then as you go, at least in the one we went to, and by the way, it was an hour drive out of town to get to the ziplining place. So we had to drive an hour on a freeway and then up a mountain till we got to and there were dirt roads, and we crossed a stream, and it was crazy. And like one lane that was it was a dirt road, but it was a lane just wide enough for the Jeep that had whatever, 10 of us in there. It was pretty fun and crazy. But so as you go through these, you get options. You could there was one place where there were 3 options. You could either walk around and skip this area because you had to go up, or you could rappel up this cliff. Now, it wasn't far. It was, I don't know, maybe 40 feet. But if you're not used to doing that, and you look up 40 feet and think, really? I'm going to climb up a rope and, do with your feet, and yeah, you're attached to something, but, my thought was, okay, I'm attached, but, if my feet slip, I'm gonna go, and am I gonna smack into the rock, or what's going on? Or there's a ladder you can climb too. They built a ladder into the cliff, and I thought, I don't know if I like that so much either. I guess you can hold on a little more, because rappelling, you're just holding on to little rocks that are there, and you're doing that like on a rappelling wall, if you've ever seen any of those. But it reminded me of a quote that I like in Living the Science of Mind, that Ernest Holmes says, and he said, God is life, and life gives itself to us. It does not give some of itself, it gives all of itself. But the gift without a receiver cannot complete itself in individual life. So this rappelling thing, this going down the zip lines as they got longer and longer and steeper, I started to realize, because I got excited. Some people didn't, as it got crazier and crazier. Now the rappelling thing I wasn't so sure about that one, but as it got longer and longer, I got excited. And then they do the thing where they kind of twist you, so you're doing this as you go down, or you can go down actually backwards if you want to do that, or upside down. Ooh, that's a fun one. Especially the last one, which was 1,200 feet. You feel a little more confident to, all right, let me go upside down, because it's so long, and it's really so much fun. But I had to give myself to receive that fun. Now, just hanging there and going down, that is kind of neat. And it was beautiful to look at the valley that we were ziplining above. But when I realized that, when I took a risk, and it was what you might call a calculated risk, because after doing it 2-3 times of the 7 times, you realize, I'm not going anywhere. I'm attached to this thing. This thing's not. And then there's always a person at the end that kind of catches you, even though they already slow you down with a brake, because we didn't have to do our own brakes. But it was designed so that when you hit a certain part of the cable, it slowed you down, and then there was somebody there to do the last catch. You do that 2-3 times, you realize, this is fine, this is cool. I am in the hands of grace here. The hands of grace happen to be a thing that's, all around you and not necessarily very comfortable in some spots, but it is there to protect you. And so then I felt so open-hearted to give of myself, which was be upside down, allow myself to twirl a little bit around, and it was really, really fun. We also went snorkeling. Anybody gone snorkeling? We've gone snorkeling in Hawaii as well. It's a big thing to do in Hawaii, but we were able to go snorkeling in this town as well. Now, the thing about snorkeling is that, you have to get in the water. And you have to learn how to work this equipment. It's not a lot of equipment, but, you got to know to clear the goggles and how to breathe through this thing, because, we're not used to breathing out of something that's in our mouths, and to forget to use that. Now, if you go swimming a lot, maybe you do, but it's different with something in your mouth, that you're actually, kind of breathing like that. But then you get down there, you're only down a half a foot because it's only so long, but then you get down there, or you can dive in if you want. The beauty of that. Now, even in Hawaii, even off the California coast, you can go snorkeling and it's really beautiful, but there's something about the Mexican coast where the water is so clear in these spots that they took us to. And the beauty, and you wouldn't really get to see that beauty because you're worrying about breathing if you just kind of went down and swam. Because the fish come at you, and it just opens your heart to see this clarity of beauty. And then they gave us food where we could, and I think there were tortillas actually, funnily enough, and we gave food, and the fish come to you, and they talk to you in a way, and it's magic, but you have to give of yourself to do that. You have to get in the water. And it reminded me, sometimes I don't get in the water. You know? I don't dip in. I think about it, and I think about how logical that would be wonderful, you know, through my logic that would be wonderful, but until I step into it, into the water, so to speak, nothing's going to happen. I have to take action. Which brings me to the fourth theme that I realized, that receiving is as important as giving. Not taking, we're receiving. Okay, do we know the difference? Yes? We'll talk about the difference a little bit. First I want to do a quote from Brene Brown from her book, The Gifts of Imperfection. And she said, until we receive with an open heart, we're never really giving with an open heart. When we attach judgment to receiving help, we knowingly or unknowingly attach judgment to giving help. When we attach judgment to receiving help, we knowingly or... Some people, it's very hard to receive. You know, people come, and I've done it, you know, come back to, you know, with you shouldn't have, when somebody gives you a gift, or you think in your head, I don't deserve this, but I'm glad I got it. Or, you know, this old thing, I've had this forever, you know. We say things like that because there's a little maybe embarrassment of receiving the compliment or the gift. If somebody gives you the gift. You know, would you do that at work when somebody was offering you a new benefit or a raise? No. You'd say, hopefully you would say thank you and get out of the office and, you know, do a dance somewhere in the restroom or something. When you accept without qualifications, you honor the other person's flow of giving and abundance as you receive this abundance. So I once learned, I don't remember who I learned this from, that it's actually an insult to not receive a gift. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about, you know, a gift in a box kind of gift. And we receive gifts from all places, whether it's a phone call, you know, how you doing, or, you know, a ride, or something like that. When we're open to receive that, it becomes a flow. It's just like when we start perceiving life as something that is revealing the divine in us, then we start sharing that life. Because it gets really exciting when you're vibrating at the speed of the divine, or some version of that phrase. It gets exciting, and you know, it's like when you see a movie that you really like, you know, you want to share that. I just saw blah, blah, blah. You got to see this. It's so funny, or it's so poignant, or et cetera, et cetera. And so when we excuse the gift by one of these phrases I said, or some version of it, even mentally, not necessarily out loud, we're not receiving it. Yeah, maybe we're taking it, but we're not receiving it. And so when I was walking around the ship a lot, with all this stuff that is, it's not free. Obviously, we paid money to be on the cruise, etc. But I just allowed myself to receive it, versus going, okay, well, you know, this, I can take this, and I'll have a little of that, and I'll go to this, and I'll, you know, take this chair, and this will be mine. And I started just being grateful for this thing I paid for. I mean, it should be mine. It should be ours. We paid for it, but it got to be more than that. It was just so fascinating how my perspective started changing even though it was something I paid for, and it was something that I quote-unquote deserved because I gave payment. And because of that, I just found myself more open to the goodness and the fun of it versus I deserve it because I paid for it. So giving and receiving is not just a spiritual idea, it's also a survival idea. And you all have heard or learned about at least one point in your life about photosynthesis. Now, photosynthesis is the idea that life is this circle between all of life. It's why we want to keep the bees around, because the bees make life available for other sentient beings in our planet, and that eventually rises up to our survival. Photosynthesis is about when we exhale, we are exhaling carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide feeds the planet as far as the plant life. They nourish themselves, of course, with water and the nutrients in the water, but also with the carbon dioxide that we exhale. And they, in a way, the plant life, exhale oxygen, and they oxygenate the planet. Now you may say, wow, come on, now there's oxygen there anyway. 28% of our oxygen comes from the rainforests, almost 30. 70% of our oxygen on this planet comes from marine plants. That's why we want to keep the oceans clean, because you start killing off that plankton, you start killing off the coral, which also feeds the fish, and when the fish go through their digestive system, that feeds the plankton and then all the other plants that are in the sea, and then that brings oxygen up from the ocean, which feeds us. 70%. That's 98% from plants of one way or the other, and then there's 2% or so, maybe a little more, a little less, depending on the years. That's just kind of there from the atmosphere, obviously. That's a lot of giving and receiving. Our life is giving and receiving. If that is not a reason to, no matter what you think about climate change, no matter what you think about that, the earth, keeping the earth clean in one way or another, or in several ways, it's our life. We will not live. We'll be like Soylent Green, if anybody's ever seen it. But the great thing about that movie is that the pollution that they showed. And if you'd lived here before the Olympics, and I lived here just a short time before we had the Olympics, the air was thick, and you could see it. And you know, I suppose there's places in China that are still like that, and they have to wear masks. But you know, that could happen if we're not careful. And that's the oxygen that we're losing. So there's this receiving and giving just in life, just between us and the plants and the earth. Generosity and gratitude is living with arms wide open. And like photosynthesis, it's free to give and free to receive automatically. It's just there, and we can accept it. But we can also at the same time recognize, and you don't have to do this every day, but every once in a while we need to recognize that there is this something greater than we are, and it's infinite, and it's exponentially spreading out, even though we can't see it. If we look out in the universe, we go up in the mountains where there's not much lights and you can really see the stars and stuff. But it's the source of everything. That's still there. That's still happening now. And every once in a while, it's great to receive that information again. It helps us step into this. by realizing what's going on. But the magic word in all of this is gratitude. Being grateful for what's happening just automatically. I want to tell you a story about Rudyard Kipling. Most of you have heard that name. He's a famous writer in the late 1800s and the early 1900s. And he wrote a great deal of books, and like Jungle Book, Gunga Din, The Man Who Would Be King. Some movies have been made from these, several movies actually. He had a great deal of money. He was a very wealthy man. He did very well. One time a newspaper reporter came up to him and said, so Mr. Kipling, I just read that somebody calculated that the money you make from your writings amounts to over $100 a word. So think of this, $100 a word in the early 1900s. Even now, some authors wish they were getting $100 a word. But Mr. Kipling raised his eyebrows and said, really? I certainly wasn't aware of that. And the reporter was kind of cynical and reached into his pocket and pulled out a $100 bill, which is a lot of money for some reporter to be carrying, but he probably planned this and wanted to do a gotcha. So he says he gives it to Rudyard Kipling, and he says, here's a $100 bill, Mr. Kipling. Now you give me one of your $100 words. So Kipling took the $100 bill, took a look at it, he folded it up, and he put it in his pocket, and he turned to the reporter, and he said, thanks. Gratitude. Everything in life works in circles, spiritually and materially. In the cruise, we circled back, and we came back to the port in Los Angeles. We circled back, and none of that freedom went away. It stayed with me. And I got reminded, like I said, a year later about that cruise, and all that happened, and all that was available, and all that I wanted to give during that trip, as well as all that I received. While there's more attention to how to give, the consciousness of receiving is just as important. It's a mutual experience reflecting our unity with each other and with spirit. And you don't have to be out at sea to notice this in your life. You don't have to be out at sea to practice this in your life. You don't have to be out at sea to be grateful for everything that's in your life. So I want you this week, as well as to use the card every day, I want you to meditate on what it means to receive. You know what it means to give. You all have friends or relatives or whatever that you love to give things to or give of yourself to. You have organizations like this one which you give of yourself to. But I want you to also be as part of that circle on the receiving end and allow yourself to receive. Not just the cool things like the big raise and the gift you really, really wanted, but the idea of receiving something that somebody wants to share with you, whether you like that a lot or not, the actual thing, or even the actual idea. It's the greater idea that someone is sharing their love, their faith, their ideas that they find exciting with you. That's what I want you to meditate on. And as you allow yourself to be inspired by that and informed by that, you're going to find yourself saying to yourself, how can I keep from singing? Namaste, everyone. Thanks so much.